Welcome back to Love, Money, Rock and Roll on the Ellie route. We left off after going to a random day and time. After Ellie dumped us, quote unquote. Sometimes it takes time for some things to become obvious. Similarly, I also needed time to realize that I genuinely loved Ellie. Unfortunately, I only realized that once it was too late. No, I wasn't gonna justify her feisty personality and propensity to draw hasty conclusions, but I couldn't blame her alone for what happened either. Every conflict has two sides. It had been in my power to decisively let Kagome know that there was and could be nothing between us. I also could have been more honest with myself and realized my feelings for Ellie sooner. But it didn't seem like Kagome had any intention of letting me go. She would initiate conversations with me at every break, called me for lunch, and brought me a bento almost every day. I kept persistently rejecting the courtship, but if something looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. I am that duck. My classmates and even Kyosuke soon started looking at me with distrust. If an outcast is solely friendly with you, then it's likely that the two of you have something in common, which in turn means that you too can be considered an outcast. I didn't know why Kagome was doing this, and I didn't care for her motives. Maybe she really did fall in love with me. Or maybe this was a complicated way to exact revenge. Revenge for what, though? In any case, I was doing everything I could to let Kagome know that I wasn't interested in getting closer to her. How it looked from the outside was, of course, another matter. Ellie kept avoiding me in every way possible. She stopped coming to the old music classroom, ignored me during breaks, and pretended I didn't even exist. At first, I tried to talk to her while she was in class, but Ellie would either act like I wasn't there or walk out into the hall and kept running away from me all over the school until the bell. It all looked silly and even comical, but not for Ellie's fan club, of whose existence I previously had no idea. A couple times, some guys tried to talk to me after class, but in the end it never resulted in violence. That's surprising. Some days you just wake up and choose violence. Autumn came into full power. Ellie continued to deny my existence, but was less and less successful at it with every day. One day I was waiting for her at her classroom, and when she was about to enter, stood in the doorway blocking it. Ellie stopped, pouted, and stared at an area around my chest with a kind of disappointment in her eyes, as if trying to burn a hole in it. She kept standing like that for a while, then tried to squeeze through though, which didn't work. I just want to have a simple conversation with you, that's all. She stubbornly avoided looking me in the eyes. There's never been anything between me and Kagome. Takehito's wrathful voice came from behind me. I turned around on reflex, and in that instant was enough for Ellie to sneak under my arm. How long is this gonna last? The anger in her eyes was mixed with disapproval, but there was no hatred or contempt in them. I don't want to appear rude, Takehito, but that's none of your business. It is, since you're violating school rules. Go on then, call the police. I scoffed and fixed her with a confident, unblinking glare, surprised at my own bravery. Our silent confrontation lasted for 10 seconds. Anoken, if you don't stop, I'll be forced to tell the principal. May as well tell the Emperor for all I care. I got interrupted by the bell and had to leave them in peace for a time. Of course, I was much more afraid of Kobayashi-jun than Takehito, as he made it clear he no longer wanted to see me near his granddaughter. Either Ellie hadn't told him how persistent I was being, or there was a different reason. But in all the time that had passed after our last conversation at my house, I never met him or his people. This couldn't help but lift my spirits, but I also felt like it couldn't continue forever. Even if Ellie herself wouldn't tell her grandfather I'd ignored his warnings, her bodyguards or someone from Kobayashi Corporation would notice me. But I'd already decided, come what may, I was prepared to do whatever it takes to not lose the girl I loved. Besides, Ellie's behavior hinted that she still had feelings for me. When you care about a person, you don't avoid contact with them so fiercely. Only if their mere appearance evokes something in your soul that you're still stubbornly trying to escape will you deny the very fact of their existence. But in reality, I hadn't made much progress over the past few weeks. Even if Ellie indeed was lying to herself, she was doing a pretty good job at it. Yeah, it's kinda hard to lie to yourself. Granted, I don't know what he's doing with Kagome, but man, it's not that hard to tell someone to well, screw off. Having successfully fended off Kagome once again, I was sitting in Kyosuke's company during break, eating a bun I bought from the cafeteria. Is it a lemon bun? Kyosuke, she just refuses to let you be. Who? Kagome. Just start that whole thing again about there being something between us. Nick, I wasn't. He didn't finish the sentence. Sighed and opened his third, by now, bag of chips. I'm trying to fix my relationship with Ellie. This attention from Kagome is the last thing I need right now. If she were a guy, I'd punch her in the face, I swear. Quiet you, he hissed at me. Anyone else would be happy to be in your place. Are you suggesting I should get together with Kagome? I'm not suggesting anything. He replied angrily and leaned back in his chair. Good, because my radar is only tuned to Ellie. Problem is, your radar is lacking in wavelength. I understand, but... Nick, have you ever thought that the two of you aren't meant to be together? There's no such thing. You make it work. I'm not talking about fate. Think of it as you being parts from different cars. So I'm from some old model and she's part of a new sports car? Is that what you mean? How's that different from fate? Well, he sighed and lowered his head. As your friend, I wish you well. The path of least resistance isn't always the best one. Have it your way. But Kyosuke's words really did make me think. We were living in the most enlightened time in the history of humanity, but did we really have equal opportunities? Yeah, the 80s. Speed forward 40 years and man, the world's a hellhole. And it wasn't about love. Juliet loved Romeo, but they weren't meant to be together. A simple Ronin could hardly marry a shogun's daughter. Indeed, could I imagine myself being next to Ellie, with her seated in her grandfather's armchair in that office, with its view upon Tokyo's business district? I was less afraid of potentially becoming Ellie's Giglio than being a toy should be able to part with as easy as with her dream to be a jockey. I was terribly scared of losing control over my own life. On the other hand, isn't that called love, when you can trust the other person with the most precious thing you have? Of course, if they want it. Just like faith, it can be thrown away if you want. I kept running after Ellie. Ellie, wait. I just want to have a talk. Is it too much to ask? Are you gonna keep running away from me until the end of the school year? Ask Kyosuke, he can tell you there is nothing and was nothing between me and Kagome. Although he wasn't the most reliable witness, however you looked at it. I love only you. Ellie, please. Ellie, enough. This is silly. You're acting like a child who didn't get her candy. What can I say for you to forgive me? Ellie, I haven't done anything wrong. If you only gave me a chance to explain everything. None of my attempts brought any results. The expression on Ellie's face softened little by little. It seemed to be getting more and more difficult for her to look away and ignore me. One day would definitely have to end, except there wasn't that much time left until graduation. And after that I wouldn't be able to see her often, if ever. It seemed there was a simple solution I just didn't have the smarts to come up with. Just a bit more time and everything would become clear to me. The pieces of the puzzle would fit together, and my broken happiness machine would start again. But not everything in our life depends on our actions alone. Another school day passed, having yielded no results. Ellie continued avoiding me and ignoring me anytime we crossed paths, as if I were a hallucination that would disappear if she paid no attention to it. I didn't have much to do besides my attempts to explain myself to her, so all my time after the end of class blended together in an endless gray stream without beginning or an end. I would come home, watch TV, read, make dinner, and sleep. At least you can cook dinner for yourself now. I didn't talk to anyone, go anywhere, or even play any games. I didn't want to tidy up, iron my clothes, wash them, or do anything housework related. Not that I used to be very diligent with that before, but now the very thought of cleaning up was painful. Moreover, my entire life started revolving around Ellie, as if everything else in the world stopped existing at all. I could only imagine life with her, or not at all. It seemed that we'd either make up, or the universe would shrink to the state it used to be before the Big Bang, having realized how pointless its existence was without our love. Obviously, somewhere deep inside I knew that my obsession wasn't normal, but I couldn't, and most importantly, didn't want to do anything about it. Oh, so just like Kagome. What's so bad about having feelings for someone? Yeah, sometimes they can be excessive or even virtually crippling, but at the same time they bring so much happiness and euphoria when your loved one responds in kind. But if they don't, stop. Granted, in this scenario, she's just trying to avoid him. And while there was any hope at all Ellie would forgive me, I walked out of the school with a firm intention to spend another pointless evening alone. But I noticed Tokyo Rider at the gates. As soon as he saw me, he started waving his hands. I remember when I was a school kid. I came closer and he greeted me with a vague gesture, as if saluting to me. That was like a couple years ago. He mysteriously flashed his dark glasses. To what do I owe the honor? I knew it probably wasn't a courtesy visit. We've got a concert today, he said and went silent as if that made everything clear. And, are you inviting me to drop by? I am in a sense. Our new bass player hurt his hand and can't play. And how do you intend to perform with no bass? It wasn't decided yet, but she told all of us to come to the club. I see. And you know the material. I felt a glimmer of hope spark in my heart. Maybe this was the lucky break I'd been waiting for. Along with it, I felt piercing doubt. And whose idea was it to invite me? Mine, Ashido, and Mutsuyoshi agreed. And Ellie? Elle doesn't know yet. She doesn't know. I smirked. So, should we expect you? He asked unperturbed. I don't know. But I felt like a shy accountant who had just been offered the position of vice president at his big company. Happy, sure, but with zero confidence that she'd be able to handle it. Well, my job here is to make the offer. You still have a few hours to think. Elle will be happy, even if she doesn't realize it yet. Those are the eyes of a snake. I like him. Having said that, he turned around and headed for his car parked on the other side of the street. Thank you, I shouted after him, and Tokyo Rider raised his hand without turning back to me, waving a farewell. The streets were particularly crowded today. I hurried home as if I had simultaneously forgot to turn off the iron, the stove, the gas, close the doors and the windows, and feed dogs I didn't have. The meeting with Tokyo Rider had kicked my brain into high gear. I couldn't stop thinking of every possible way taking his offer could end in failure. Here was Ellie simply ignoring me, and here she was mockingly asking how I'd even thought about something like that. And I was getting beaten up by guards, dragged out of the club and left to bleed out in a dirty alley. Or maybe I was even running into Kobayashi-Jun himself in the dressing room. That would be awkward. Except that he would be doing there. The door turned out to be locked. The window was closed and the gas was off. I was walking back and forth from one corner of the kitchen to the other and couldn't decide what to do. I don't think I have to make a choice or anything, but we'll save just in case. Nothing stopped me from running after Ellie the entire day at school, but when I finally got a chance to make her talk to me, all my determination suddenly evaporated. After all, she'd most likely have to say something if I were to offer to replace their bass player. He'd picked the perfect time to hurt his hand. Tokyo Rider's mysterious grin appeared before my eyes. He couldn't have, could he? I was so agitated I couldn't sit still. The kitchen was too small for me. No, Tokyo Rider probably... Man, those guys totally broke his hands or something. You don't just have an accident with your hands. I walked into my bedroom and my gaze stopped on the bass. Oh, for Christ's sakes. I could just offer my help as a friend, it didn't have to be about love. It wasn't even for Ellie. There were the other guys too. After all, she wasn't alone in sad feels. All my doubts disappeared at once, and there was no thought in my mind but to appear on the stage as soon as possible with a guitar in my hands. I dashed into the hall, quickly put on my shoes and ran out of the house. There seemed to be even fewer people on the street. I ran effortlessly and breathed regularly. The wind whistled in my ears and my legs were full of a pleasant strength. At one point, it started to feel like I was standing still, the world around me flying by like a cityscape behind a train window. I could feel confidence and determination in every cell of my body. This time I was going to do things right. Finally, the club appeared from around the corner. Tokyo Rider and Nishida were standing at the entrance. I ran to them and caught my breath. So you came after all. I ran. Nick, we're very grateful no matter what. Nishida shook my hand firmly. Sure, no problem. But you need to talk to Elle. She's been angry ever since she found out that our bassist won't be able to play. She locked herself up in the dressing room and isn't letting anyone in. Got it. There was no reason to rush anymore, so I slowly entered the club. Inside, there were only a few other musicians, idly sipping beers at the bar. Ellie, it's me. I carefully knocked on the door of the dressing room. I jerked onto the door handle. Strangely, it wasn't locked. I stepped in and saw Ellie standing in the middle of the room with an absent expression on her face. Hi. She didn't even look at me. The guy said that your new bass player hurt his hand. Wasn't I framing them? Although it was the truth, what was there to hide? I just want to help you. Help as that feels. How are you going to perform without a bassist? Her persistence was worthy of a better cause. We don't have to talk. We'll just go on to stage play and then I'll leave. I understand you're angry. I admit that you have a reason to be upset at me. But you're acting like a child at this point. Other people shouldn't have to suffer because of our relationship. She remained silent while I walked across the dressing room and noticed the sachet on the table. A sachet with powder. A pretty heavy one. I grabbed it and came close to Ellie. So, you're doing it again? She finally paid some attention to me. It's none of your business. Of course not. I scoffed sarcastically. Who asked you to come? We'll play without a bass. No big deal. We played with you before. There's not much a difference. Thanks for the compliment. But from the tone of her voice, it was clear that Ellie just wanted to hurt me and didn't really believe what she was saying. Why do you keep trying to get close to me? Go to your whore. She suddenly burst into tears. Here we go again. How many times do I have to repeat that there's nothing between me and Kagome, and there never was? Then why are you two always together? Because she's stalking me. When are we together? At school during every break? Who told you that? Everyone saw it. Ellie got a bit embarrassed. Ah, everyone. I flung my arms up in the air. Kagome really wants something from me, but I don't know what. She talks about love. Ellie was about to start crying again. Would you wait a minute? I don't think love has anything to do with it. Maybe she wants to tear us apart. Avenge her father. Have you ever thought of that? But why? Something akin to realization flashed on her face for a moment. I don't know. She believes that her father had been kidnapped by Corporation Corporation. I said carefully, blaming the simulacrum instead of a specific person, her grandfather. Very convenient, Nick. Ellie frowned. What, is it my fault again? Maybe I kidnapped him. Chasing two rabbits. Do you really think I want to harm him? We've been together, not that long, but long enough for you to get to know me. At least I hope so. She lowered her eyes again, like a puppy who just made a mess. And if Kagome really wants us to fight each other, she's doing a great job, and you're helping her brilliantly. And anyway, I came here to help with the performance, not to sort out a relationship. So you think I can stand on stage if... Tears ran down her red cheeks, and in that moment, Ellie looked more beautiful than ever. If what? I don't know, I can't when I see you with her. She choked on her sobs. You're the only one I love. And he called her Sunshine. Wow. Himitsu would probably go all yandere on him if she saw that. When I looked at her in that instant, everything became clear. If this wasn't fate, what then? Destiny or quantum determinism? It was a matter of terminology, but one way or another, we were meant to meet and fall in love with each other. Would you really allow such a petty thing to destroy our love? I understand that I'm at fault here. At first, I thought everything was going too fast. I guess it's because my old wounds hadn't fully recovered. And you wanted more from me, while I still had my doubts. Doubts about myself. Forgive me, you've always been so confident and happy. Maybe somewhere deep inside I believed I wasn't worthy of you. Do I look confident now? Ellie smiled weakly. I don't know. I'm being torn apart by different feelings. One second I love you like mad, and the next when I see you with her I hate you. It shouldn't be like that, right? Maybe I'm crazy. I must be wrong in the head, right, Nick? She looked at me with hope in her eyes. No, you're fine, it's just that... I waved the sachet I was holding in my hands. I never wanted to go far as that, and this helps me relieve the stress. Relax. For a moment, and then nothing. Grandpa will make me stop playing music anyway and ditch you. You don't know that. I almost shouted. If we're together, do you even believe that yourself, Nick? Maybe yesterday, I wouldn't have been able to answer this question, but now, standing next to Ellie, I was sure it was bound to happen. And even if not, I'd prefer to try and know that I'd done my best rather than regret the missed opportunity and blame myself for my cowardice for the rest of my life. I believe that if we love each other, only we can decide our future. Nick, I want to believe you. I interrupted her, exclaiming, Then do. In 5, 10 years, we'll only have memories of this moment. What do you want them to be? And maybe Kyosuke was right. I couldn't imagine myself sitting next to Ellie in Kobayashi-jun's office. But I could absolutely picture us on a stage, shoulder to shoulder. On a bigger stage than the one in this seedy club. Nick, you keep saying those beautiful words no one could resist. Is this how you seduced Kagome? I didn't. Suddenly, Ellie smiled. Relax, I'm joking. I always knew you loved me, I just couldn't sort myself out. I still can't, to be honest, but you're right. We should give it a try. I don't want to regret not even trying to fight for something. Ellie? I came close and wanted to kiss her, but Ellie pulled away. Let's do it after the concert. Right now we have to focus on our performance. Otherwise, all this talk will have been for nothing. Alright, I'll tell the guys, but first. I stretched the sachet out to her. Ellie looked at it, hesitating for some time, then took it, disappeared behind the toilet door, and I heard the sound of flushing water. When she came back, she said confidently, I'm done with that. I'm glad. Go already. I hope you're done with it. Drugs are bad. Ellie pushed me to the door and walked out of the dressing room after me. It seemed that was the most difficult part was over. The guys were waiting for us on the street. Ishida was leaning on the wall, arms crossed over his chest, staring into space. Mitsuyoshi was pacing back and forth, occasionally glancing at the clock. Meanwhile, Tokyo Rider was studying the variety of beers offered by a nearby vending machine, looking remarkably composed. When they saw Ellie and me, they froze and looked at us impatiently. You might say that you've got yet another new bass player. I tried to make a joke, and Ellie immediately pinched me for that. Ouch. Thank goodness. Ishida breathed out with relief. It's just the circumstances. I don't have another choice. Elle being herself, the guys laughed simultaneously. In a sense, today we moved up in the world. We were performing second to last. There was still tension between me and Ellie, but our emotions had cooled and she seemed to have given the situation a more sober appraisal. Of course, I shouldn't have expected everything to go back to how it used to be in an instant. And I didn't want that either. I wanted to grow up and move forward, not just indulge myself in juvenile infatuation. We walked out onto the stage to face an audience already decently warmed up by the previous bands and alcohol. Come on, rock it. I heard from the hall. Ellie confidently walked to the microphone and shouted, Hi everyone, we're Zed Fields. For these 20 minutes, every offense was forgotten. Ellie was focused on the music. In a sense, right now music was her job. And she was doing her job like a professional, giving it her all. Every note, every chord sounded genuine and came straight from the heart. I compared Ellie to other lead singers of the bands that played before us, but she seemed so much more vivid and talented, that at some point, I felt ashamed to be on the same stage as her. But then neither Ishida, nor Mitsuyoshi, or Tokyo Rider were embarrassed in the slightest, even though they could hardly be called natural-born musicians. And even if the band had a leader, we were playing together. I suddenly realized that these thoughts had occupied my mind almost the entire first song, and I was barely even looking at the bass. I had to make an effort not to forget my part like that centipede that forgot how to walk. My second concert was working out better for me than my first. Something familiar always seems simpler, no matter how complicated it was initially. My fingers ran up and down the strings effortlessly, but the rhythmic vibration of the strings running through my entire body felt as natural as my own pulse. Here came that part I'd been having so much difficulty with. And there it went, played without a single stumble, even a little improvisation. The audience received us much better than last time. It was hard for me to say whether it was because of our music or just the people in the audience. And the emotions of the crowd were transmitted to us, as if we, like our instruments, were plugged into an electrical grid, through which delight, joy, excitement, ecstasy, and passion flowed. The energy was overwhelming me. I jumped as high as I could, bending my legs in the air. Ishida noticed and followed my lead the next time. Some people in the hall started to sing along, and soon the lonely voices became a unified choir that joined Ellie during the choruses. Thank you, you're the best. She shouted in the microphone, moving a strand of sweaty hair from her face. And the next song is called... I caught my breath and wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans. I glanced around and looked at Mitsuyoshi. He gave me a big smile, winked at me, and gave the count for the next song. At that moment, I kind of felt absolute happiness. It wasn't only about me making up with Ellie. Maybe for the first time in my life, I found something I really enjoyed doing. Not just in a physical sense like food, alcohol, or sex. Yeah, you definitely liked alcohol. I was doing something other people liked, and got immediate feedback from the people gathered in the hall. They liked Zedfield's music, and I was a part of Zedfield's. Maybe their new bass player's hand would heal soon and I'd be kicked out, but that'd be later. And now I felt an incredible sense of unity with the guys and Ellie. Ashid was playing a solo and I sneaked a peek at her. Ellie was beautiful, like a Scandinavian mourner maiden running into the heat of battle. Had a girl like that really chosen me? And moreover, had forgiven me after everything that had happened? I suddenly remembered Catherine. What had been my fault back then? But then she'd also ditched me without saying a word. Flew 1,000 kilometers away, and when she came back, pretended like nothing had happened. But Ellie, tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to throw the bass away, run to Ellie and take her into a firm embrace. Luckily, there was only one more song left. We left the stage, accompanied by non-stop applause. We couldn't stay in the dressing room for too long. The headliners of the evening were preparing for their performance there. We walked down to the hall and were immediately swarmed by people. Some asked for autographs, others about future performances, and if we were planning on recording an album. Of course, Ellie was the center of attention. Meanwhile, Ashita was particularly popular with the girls, and the humble bass player had no place here. Besides, I desperately wanted to catch my breath somewhere more peaceful. I excused myself and carefully made my way through the crowd to the exit. The freezing evening air was pleasantly energizing, but I didn't feel cold. My entire body was on fire, the level of adrenaline way beyond normal. I took several deep breaths and looked up the stairs. They were shining unusually brightly, but today there was just one star I wanted to look at. Nick, where do you run off to? I turned around and saw Ellie as she approached me, stopped and wrapped her arms around herself, shivering from the cold. I was a little too hot in there, so I wanted some fresh air. Thought so. I barely managed to sneak away myself. Just don't tell me you don't like the attention. I just wanted to talk to you. For some reason I grew embarrassed. The concert went great. We played like gods. I couldn't have hoped for better. Yeah, it went well, she said without any enthusiasm. But Nick, while we were on stage I realized something. But we need to talk to Grandpa if we want to be together. If we want to. Keep playing music. Alright, I breathed out with relief. So you love me? Of course, I always have. She said simply. Did you ever doubt it? Yeah, occasionally. Ellie laughed and embraced me. For now, you'll never have to doubt me. Is that a promise? It is. We said goodbye to the guys and started waiting for a car outside the club. Are you sure this is a good idea? Nick, she stomped her foot. I'm not saying we shouldn't talk to him at all, but maybe tomorrow. Well, what will change tomorrow? You're right. Nothing. I sighed in resignation. Soon a star cop stopped by, a man in a black suit with a grim-looking face stepped out of it and gave Ellie a questioning look. He's coming with me today. No objections followed. And we're back here. Man, I sure hope I don't get shot. I doubt it. I think we're close to the ending. Are you scared? Ellie asked with a smile on her face. She certainly had nothing to be scared about. It was her house. If I say I'm not, will that be the right answer? Let's go then. Once we reached the ballroom, Ellie stopped. Wait here, I'll call for Grandpa. So does Kobayashi-jin live here? Is this their house? Even if my own home seemed sometimes too big and empty, how did Ellie oh my goodness, this is their house. Yeah, that's too much. Even though there wasn't a single speck of dust anyway, and every surface virtually sparkled. Luckily, the lights in the chandelier under the ceiling shone brightly, otherwise, I would have imagined ghosts roaming the endless dark halls of the house. It took at least 10 minutes, but I finally heard steps in the distance. Quick, light, springy, and after them, heavy and slow, but at the same time, filled with confidence. Ellie appeared on the balcony first. Get bored without us? Walked up the stairs to them and politely bowed to Kobayashi-jun, trying to make the gesture not seem too sycophantic. Nikolai. His voice sounded like he'd run into a particularly unlikable employee in a narrow corridor. Grandpa, we need to have a serious talk. Nick and I made up and... Our first words didn't come easy to her, and the old man used, quickly interjecting, Really? And here I thought you and Nikolai weren't together anymore since he... The old man squinted cunningly, giving me a quick glance. I hope you hadn't forgotten what you just told me recently. It's all in the past. Your mood changes very quickly, Elizabeth. It's a bad habit. Maybe, but it's my habit. Ellie retaliated, crossing her arms over her chest and taking a wide stance. And so is playing music. Nick is gonna play in our band again. Really? So today's concert wasn't gonna be a one-time thing? Although that was undeniably good news. So, the musician I'd found for you didn't fit the band? He plays well, but it's our band, and I want Nick to play bass in it. I see. Anything else? Well, aren't you gonna scold me? Was he not prepared to talk openly in my presence? If so, this kind of sensitivity looked a little petty, given the scale of Kobayashi-jun as a person. Elizabeth, I'm ready to discuss it with you another time. She grinned, finding her grandfather's weak spot. Did he really not know what had been going on? That I'd been running after Ellie for the past while, but the powder, even Tokyo Rider's visit. It was in his power to get rid of me when Ellie and I had broken up. What was it? Sentimentality, or just complete my phobia when it came to his family? Elizabeth, I really think that. I decided it was time for me to interfere. Kobayashi-sama, I know you might think I'm good for nothing, but I'll make every effort to make your granddaughter happy. Words are just words, Nikolai. They're worth no more than the air we're breathing. Do you believe that strumming those guitars of yours is true happiness? Grandpa, Ellie exclaimed resentfully. And even if I wanted, I cannot approve of such. It's the end of the 20th century, you know. Are you gonna force me into marrying one of your business partners who'll be 30 years older than me? The old man frowned, and for an instant, it seemed like he was finally ready to show Ellie her place. But instead, he just softly reprimanded her. I lived a long life, said Elizabeth, and I know how to avoid the mistakes that my parents made, you want to say? He froze and looked straight at her unblinkingly. And since you blame yourself for Mom's death, you decided to take it out on me. But lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. Elizabeth, this is not a subject for discussion. The risk is too... Risk, Grandpa? Seriously? You're saying this. Weren't you taking risks when you were 18? Weren't risks required to create Kobayashi Corporation? I'm a different matter. He replied hesitantly. Really? And why is that? Well, because... This was seemingly the first time I'd seen Kobayashi-jin lose. At least to an extent. But I still can get rid of the feeling that he was about to run out of patience and order his goons to bury me somewhere in the forest behind the house. Maybe they had an entire cemetery there already. Grandpa, it's not fair to me. What if we become stars? Don't you want me to succeed, even if it's gonna be in something else? But the question was asked point blank, and even Kobayashi-jun, smooth-tongued as he was, would find it hard to get out of this one. Elizabeth, I really think we should discuss this once you've calmed down a little. Good thing I'd managed to get to the club before Ellie had the time to snort out anything earlier today. I wonder what her grandfather would have said then. No way, we're discussing this here and now. I was a bit afraid to enter their argument, but the old man noticed that and apparently decided to use it. Nikolai, at least you should talk some sense at her. After all, you said you're ready to make her happy. But I think Ellie's right, Kobayashi. She's not a child anymore. She can make decisions about her future herself and bear responsibility for them. Responsibility. He smirked. So far, all your mistakes have been corrected by us adults. Saying that, the old man for some reason kept looking at me. Kobayashi, we're not living in a dystopia. Children grow up, some make mistakes on the way, but the majority become normal people. Normal? It's not enough for me that Elizabeth becomes normal. But you want her to be happy, don't you? Yeah, Grandpa, you do, right? Ellie frowned. Kobayashi-jun paused for a few moments, then gave us a big smile and said, I can see that you have your heart set on this, but this conversation isn't over yet. He turned around preparing to leave, but suddenly stopped and said one more thing. When I was left alone with Ellie, she breathed a sigh of relief. Oof, that went way better than I expected. Yeah, you think so? On the other hand, he wasn't obstructing our relationship in any way, at least for now, and maybe just decided to wait for Ellie to change her mind again. I didn't want to admit it, but her grandfather knew her way better than I did. Either way, it's all up to us now. I have to do something with my personality too. Being a spoiled Ojo-sama isn't always a good thing. What, aren't you gonna say, no Ellie, you aren't like that at all? Well, if you think so yourself. Your grandpa wanted to ask you to go to bed earlier. But, no buts, we just made our peace with him. You wanna screw up everything again? Fine. She responded, not even sounding too disappointed. I'll ask the driver to take you home. That'd be very convenient, but before that. We walked out to the street, immediately embraced by the chilling, piercing wind. Winter was coming. And no, not Game of Thrones. That show sucked. I shivered, and which didn't escape Ellie's notice. Hold on, I'll be right back. She returned a couple later with my jacket in her hands, the one I'd put around her shoulder that night on the square in the center of Tokyo. Here. Ellie proudly handed it to me. Just in time, I laughed. The lights flew by me. I was sitting in the back of an expensive executive car, idly watching the endless streets, the numerous lanterns snatched out of the dark, the electrical lights of signs and houses. In a sense, Tokyo never slept, doing its best to ward off darkness for the sake of every citizen who did not wish to surrender to Morpheus's embrace. I have no idea what Morpheus is. But right now, the only thing I wanted was to get to my bed and end this crazy day as soon as I could. To start a new one tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. Of course, Kobayashi-jun question was far from resolved. Not everything was clear about my relationship with Ellie either, but today I'd done something incredibly important and matured a lot. Maybe I'd even say probably. New challenges awaited us in the future. At least things don't look as hopelessly grim anymore. Time passed by and soon life returned to normal. Kyosuke seemed almost happier than me that I made up with Ellie. Michael was more reserved but also congratulated me on the occasion, even feeling charitable enough to give a smile. Learning about it, the rest of the classmates pretended they hadn't been avoiding me just recently, suspecting that Kagome and I were a thing. Kagome herself was clearly unhappy about it, but did her best to not show it and stop chasing me around. Which I was very happy about, since it clearly took an effort for Ellie to hold back her baseless jealousy. The guys in the band also breathed a sigh of relief when things calmed down. The last concert was even more successful than the one we'd had first. We started getting more offers from organizers. We had to practice more than before. Ellie and Nishida started writing new songs, while I tried to spend several hours almost every evening perfecting my bass technique. Soon, graduation exams began, so Ellie and I started spending much less time together. But I still felt that our love had become stronger with each day. On the day of our graduation ceremony, every student gathered in the yard. The principal's never-changing podium appeared at the school's entrance, but Ellie was nowhere to be seen. I ran to her classroom, but it was empty. Well, then it was obvious. The old schoolroom was filled with the sounds of a piano. Ellie was sitting behind it, playing one of our songs, staring unblinkably in front of her. Alright, there you are. I've been looking for you everywhere. Let's go, they'll start without us. Nick? Come on, we'll be late. She closed the lid and pouted. I don't want to, She suddenly sobbed. I'm scared. Of what? I don't want our school days to end. We've been so happy here, and I don't know what will happen to us in the future. Well, we'll only be happier. Distracted by the mundane, lately I'd barely considered the future. Unexpectedly, the future for me started to consist of the following day's rehearsal, repeating bass parts, and thoughts of what to make for dinner to surprise Ellie. I guess I had my share of suffering. I just wanted to appreciate the current moment. We can't stay high schoolers our entire lives. We need to move on. We can't, why not? I came closer. Should have thought about it early if you wanted to repeat the year. Too late now. Kiyama-sensei's about to start handing out diplomas. Then let's not take them. You'll get yours by mail anyway. I grinned and sat down next to her. Nick, I'll remember this room forever. She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me. When I'm here with you, I don't need anything else. Oh, no. We'll be late. Then you better not waste time arguing. Oh my gosh. That is not what you're supposed to do. Naturally, Ellie had to enroll into a university, even though she particularly didn't want to. But our grandfather reasonably decided that having a university degree would never hurt, no matter what she was planning to do with her life. Meanwhile, I found a job at a game development company with Kyosuke's help. Our responsibilities included picking up the mail, making coffee, sending press releases to different newspapers and magazines, and sometimes even helping programmers with simpler tasks that didn't require much knowledge or proficiency. I liked the job, and most importantly, it didn't tire me out. I was employed as a part-timer, so I didn't spend 2/3 of my days at the office like the majority of the Japanese workforce. We would rehearse in the evenings and perform almost every week, and I would often spend nights together with Ellie. Strangely enough, it didn't feel like she was growing distant after our school life ended. Naturally, in many senses, each of us had our own lives now, but they followed parallel paths to the same destination, not diverging into different directions. I really wanted Zed Fields to be recognized out of the crowded halls of rock clubs. But the other guys were getting older, Ishida had started a family, and the money from our performances and part-time jobs was no longer enough for him. And working full-time in modern Japanese society didn't allow any kind of serious involvement in music. On the one hand, I realized that the only irreplaceable person in the band was Ellie, but on the other, I could be rightfully called a musician by then, and I didn't want to get some random guy to take Ishida's place. Or anyone else's, to be honest. We were a harmonious and tight-knit group, which doesn't happen often with rock bands. But that's when we got lucky. They say that fortune favors the bold, but the bold are usually the people who put the most effort into what they do. And if you can flip a coin a million times, sooner or later it will inevitably land on its edges. In short, we were offered an album recording contract by one of the labels that worked with rock music. It wasn't the biggest, but famous enough to satisfy our egos and fill our wallets. By then, we had more than enough material, and it turned out to be a complicated task to choose songs to fit the 45-minute runtime. We spent several months in a studio, trying different arrangements, endlessly re-recording the instrument tracks, helping the director with mixing and mastering. Finally, our first album, Bad Days, Good Days, saw the light of day. It's difficult to pinpoint the moment when I realized we stopped being one of the beginner bands that spent their free time on music, not hoping to achieve anything greater. Somehow it happened all on its own. And there I was, quitting my job and dedicating myself fully to playing bass. Around that time, I'd finally moved in with Ellie. Or to be exact, she's moved in with me. Of course, her grandfather objected, but that war had long been lost, and it could be the conversation that evening after the concert had been the decisive battle. When you back down once, it becomes easier and easier to make concessions afterwards. In small matters at first, and then in more and more important things. Apparently, even people like Kobayashi Jun are powerless against the fundamental laws of psychology. Throughout all that time, I only saw him a couple times, but it always seemed to be accidental. When I was visiting Ellie at her place, the old man was polite, and his face never expressed anything but hospitality, practiced to the point it had become automatic. It was hard for me to say how genuine it was, and I didn't even want to think about that. But he wasn't getting any younger, and sooner or later there had to be the moment when the question of inheritance could no longer be postponed. People saying there was a young and promising girl in the corporation who was already running the business planning department, and she seemed to be the same age as Ellie and me. In Japan, inviting a person from outside to continue the family business is a common practice. So why wouldn't Kobayashi Attention pay attention to that girl? In any case, I didn't care much about the fate of his corporations, since it no longer had anything to do with Ellie. A black-haired girl. That sounds like Kagome. It's amazing how things had seemed to be crucial just recently, and the dangers that seemed so lethal are washed away with the flow of time like images or 100-year-old photos, and the sounds and feelings that accompany them fade away. And then the choice became, or between chunks of meat at a convenience store, becomes a more serious challenge than how the turmoils of the past are seen in your memories. Or maybe it only happens with issues that are happily resolved. Either way, tourism isn't the same as immigration, and at first, Ellie found it hard to live without maids, a cook, and personal driver. Of course, she'd stayed at my place plenty of times before, but never longer than several days in a row. Naturally, she never had to wash and iron clothes, clean the house, or, heavens forbid, cook her own food. She tried to bear with her new responsibilities stoically, but I could see that it wasn't easy for her. To find out in your 20s that a shirt will be crumpled if it isn't ironed, it'd be a shock to anyone. I wouldn't say it was always easy, that there were never arguments or even fights between us. Ellie would often have large sums of money on hand exactly when we needed it most. I knew that her grandfather was helping her, but didn't dare argue because we really needed it. It was hard for me to say what was driving Kobayashi-jun. How would I have acted if I were in his shoes? Perhaps it only seemed weird to me because I lacked experience in life. Or maybe I didn't know something important. Several more years passed. We finished recording our third album and were invited to perform at the Budokan for the first time. It's what we dreamed our entire lives. Although I'd hardly dreamt of becoming a professional musician before I turned 18, but was it that important? Scientists say that human cells are fully replaced over the course of 7 years. I was 25 by now, which means I was a completely different person from my 18-year-old self. I feel that. And there we were, going on stage. Ellie was a bit ahead, with me right behind. The crowd had been roaring and chanting Zedfields for a while now. Why do you always need to make the audience wait? To warm up and rile them up before the actual performance was probably the right answer. We'd probably played on other open stages in big clubs many times before, but the Budokan was on a completely different level. The sound of our guitars traveled hundreds of meters all around us, slipping between the stands, flying all the way to the arches of the roof. The bass was rippling rhythmically through the people in the front rows, and it seemed to me that an ocean was raging in front of us, preparing for a storm. Even our instruments started to sound different, more majestic and menacing, like Vikings' horns before a battle. As usual, Ellie was giving it her all, and I suddenly remembered how it all started. The day when she first walked into my room, tuned the bass, and the two of us played one of the songs that would be part of today's concert. It seemed that it happened so long ago, but at the same time, the memories preserved their old colors. Ellie's shining smile, her golden laughter. That seemed so unreachable to me back then. But in the break between songs, she turned to me and smiled, just like back then, 7 years ago. It was incredible how two different people from different worlds had fallen in love with each other, weathered every challenge, and were still together even after such a long time. But not standing in place, no, but moving forward to new heights. It could be that a world tour lay out ahead of us. Maybe we'd even perform in Russia, now that it was open to the world after the collapse of the USSR. In another 7 years, the 20th century would be over, but I believed Ellie and I would still be together, and Zedfields would still be performing. My stubbornness could have led me the wrong way more than once or even cost me my life, but if I had made any other choices, I wouldn't be standing on the stage with the woman I loved. Though the lyrics of her songs made thousands of people in the audience ecstatic, I knew that only our love was filling them with true meaning. Every story has its beginning and end, but ours was just getting started. Nice. And we're on to the credits. Ellie's are out and Kagome's are out there. They're both intertwined. Especially considering Kagome is actually related to Ellie. Not directly, but related to Kobayashi-jun. She's probably the star pupil that is taking over Kobayashi Corporation, since you didn't get involved and make her dad become a turncoat. You follow your dreams in this one, and the other route, I guess you follow your dreams, you're not doing a normal job. Really good game. I don't plan on playing the Catherine and Mitsu routes, mainly because I really don't like their characters. I really don't. We'll continue Nightmare of the Snow on Wednesday. If you guys still like my commentary, I normally just play RPGs and stuff like that. Granted, every now and then I do play visual novels. They're a lot more calming since I'm not running for my life. That being said, I hope you have enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget the like button, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. I'm gonna let the credits roll. As always, goodbye.